through Wednesday's front pages. That word has been selected specially for our panel. Stephen Allen and Scott Kapuru, couple of prime rompers.
I feel that one of us might be better at romping than the other.
First off, we can all see the imperial purple throbbing under your collar.
One tries to just purpley romp.
Are you all right, Scott?
I'm all right, yeah.
Do you want to flourish your new phone? You've been very excited about that.
Very excited, new purchase, and I just did a 2-hour yoga class, so I had my feet behind my head for 2 hours.
Wow, you are limber. OK, let's take a look at those front pages. The Daily Mail front page. Their headline is indefensible in more ways than one. The Telegraph, UK blocks Macron's bid to send troops to the Ukraine. Guardian, Tories putting party before sexual assault claim, says alleged victim. Picture of Jonathan Dibbleby there campaigning for assisted suicide. The Sun, Hugh Row, that's a phonetic challenge. Hugh Row. BBC say sorry. The iNews, Labour yet to convince 40% of target voters. New poll finds. It's interesting. And finally, the Metro, £16 for a pack of cigs. That is news rather than a advertisement. So those were your front pages. So we're going to kick off with Wednesday's Telegraph.
Yep, they go with UK blocks Macron's bid to send troops to Ukraine. And just looking at the headline, you think, well, if you want to send French people, why are we getting involved? Sadly, that's not what it's about. It was a decision to send, or a plan to send NATO troops to Ukraine. And the worry that this would be a major escalation. But I don't know, one thought would be at some point it's going to escalate. Maybe you want to be the escalators rather than the escalatees.
Right, that's an interesting... To be the escalator, yeah. That's How do you feel about that, Scott?
About him making words up? I don't feel great about it.
It's just like a Latin end to a word, doesn't it?
Maybe. Yes. Feels like something. I think...
Attack is the best form of defence.
Zelensky has announced, I think it was yesterday, didn't he, say that 31,000 Ukrainian troops have died, and I think that is a major war, and I think NATO needs to move in. I don't know what they're waiting for. It's 2 years now, and it's not going to get any better. And the Russian leader has said clearly he has no interest in receding, in pulling back or pulling out.
No.
He wants to move on. He wants to break those borders down. The more disruption in Europe, the better for him.
But would you not think that if we to send... I mean, presumably there are international law on this, so I'm only speculating, but that is crossing the line, isn't it?
Well, do we not have... Well, we also have a deal with Ukraine when they got rid of the nukes. Can't remember the name of the city that it was named after. Isn't it the Budapest? Something. Whoops, it doesn't matter.
Minsk?
The agreement,
that was Minsk was something else.
Yeah, the agreement is that if you're going to get rid of the nuclear weapons, then we will protect you. Well, this is protecting them. This would be under that, surely.
It's already an illegal invasion, an illegal war anyway. So I think international law is sort of... not really on the table.
Okay, I'm going to come back and hold you to that.
All right.
when we're broadcasting from rubble. What is in The Guardian?
The Guardian says...
Is that you, or are we on The Guardian? No, sorry, I've jumped one. It's the Daily Mail.
The Daily Mail. Indefensible, despite growing global threats and warnings from military top brass. Jeremy Hunt says that he's rejecting boosts to forces in the budget. And there are politicians saying, we're scrambling for money, we're running out of defence spending, we should be spending more, we're spending less. Yeah. And Hunt says there's no money for it. And he said, despite wars raging in Europe and the Middle East, the Chancellor is defying calls to give the Ministry of Defence more money. So I guess the question really is, do people in the UK feel protected enough?
I mean, it's always heading up towards an election. Money has been tight for as long as anyone can remember. COVID certainly didn't help. Debts is a significant part now of the national budget. Debt repayments and interest rates have gone up.
My organic milk has gone up 30%.
Yeah,
and I'm sticking with it.
It's not the worst thing. Yeah, but I do kind of feel if you sold it to people hard enough, you could probably increase defence spending. I think actually a lot of people find it quite disturbing when they actually confront just how weak we've become.
Yes, and this seems like a bad week to say no more boost to our ability to defend when we've just plopped a couple of nukes into the water instead of launched them properly. That was an embarrassment, wasn't it? That was the ability to fully launch.
And that was expensive too. So why waste money on defence? Why not spend it on good things?
I mean, most people at this point, I think, would roundly support the reintroduction of national service and conscription for young men. for a start, rather than spending another 30 billion on Trident 3.0. They would rather see young men trained, fit, healthy, you know,
I'd love to
a few
see that.
pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, why not do what the Swiss do and have everybody conscripted up to the age of 60? The Swiss can amass a militia in about 5 minutes. And when you go to Switzerland, which I'm about to do, you go to the local pool, like everybody's in great shape. Why? Well, they're prepared.
And they come back for 6 months every 5 years or something like that, don't they?
Couple
and
of
you can
push-ups.
do useful things as well, like hold jumble sales and you know, get the old folk out.
Yeah, all that stuff.
When you say most people would think this, do you think you might have one of those sympathetic fallacy moments where
you think I'm in a bubble? Are you accusing me of being in a bubble?
Maybe most people wouldn't like the idea of it.
Me and the retired colonels.
Well, we do take our safety for granted, and there is someone that I follow online. I think he works for Russia, but he does say that they want what we have, and that might be what. You know, Putin's all about what
I don't think Putin wants what we have, but there'll be a number of mincing steps towards us. But this is, of course, the question. This came up in Yes Minister. People have been sharing this clip 30 years ago. At what point would you deploy the nuclear deterrent? Would you deploy it when he has another crack at Kiev? Would you deploy it when he invades Poland? Would you deploy it?
He's already dropped a few bombs in Poland. I do. He's testing Europe to see how far he can go, and obviously he can go a lot farther. I mean, he's running out of money too, and he's not paid his troops in quite a long time.
This is the funny thing. This war has erupted for the first time in history, I think, when there's an enormous shortage of fighting-age men in both countries involved. Anyway, we must move on, Steve. This is The Guardian next.
Tories putting party before sexual assault claims, says alleged victim. It's the story of a woman who says that no action was taken after she was attacked by an MP, and it says this is about spin, effectively, to try and protect the party. Maybe it's because of the run-up to an election. Either way, if this is true, and we're taking the word of one person, but it seems believable that politicians might be somewhat...
Protected?
Yeah, well, yeah, protected and likely to protect themselves.
Has this happened when he was... How can I put it? When he was acting in his role as... Is it like something that happened in the House of Commons or in a political event, or is it...
I don't think we get...
We don't really know, because she's being very cagey about it. It's rather hard to know what to make of it.
Well, she needed treatment in a private hospital, didn't she? And I'm not sure that's psychological treatment or if that was physical abuse treatment. But when I read this title at first, it seemed a bit misleading. I read it out loud twice. I thought that it meant that Tories are putting up partying before a sexual assault claim, meaning they were at a party, they couldn't deal with her. That's what I thought that meant.
Because they've put partying before so many other things.
They do. They have in the past,
I'm really sorry about this, but it is the party.
I know it's COVID, but we're having drinks, so I thought that's what this was.
And then, I don't know if you prepared any observations about this, but the Jonathan Dimbleby is seeking the law to be changed on assisted dying. Any thoughts?
And do you know what? I'm in favour of it, because I'm Vulcan. You know, if you watch enough Star Trek, as long as you have the safeguards in place, all of the arguments against it are all about failures that should be solved by safeguards rather than saying, no, you're not allowed it.
Yes,
I think Holland's the country, too, is talking about applying it, too, and also using it for people that have mental disorders or people that have severe depression problems. And then you start to wonder, well, who else are they going to assist?
This is the fear, of course, the incremental creep, a little bit like Putin tiptoeing over to Poland. But it is... It's hard to console somebody who is in constant agonising chronic pain and knows that it's not going to get better with that kind of observation.
I think Dimbleby has personal experience with that. It must have been incredibly painful, really hard to watch.
Yeah. Well, apparently, they mention this in the story. He is a close friend of King Charles. Yeah. And they seem to suggest that might be significant somehow. I don't know, that's rather a sinister observation.
Well, Steve was saying there were rumours, in his house at least,
don't blame me
that Charles is pancreatic, but I'm pretty sure that I think he's quite ill, actually. And I think everyone's wondering in mainstream media why he's not handing the crown over to his son now, when he still can, but I think it's because he's not going to be around for that much longer, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, obviously, speculation of that.
The bloated fingers, though. We all saw the bloated fingers.
We must be very careful. Well, we will end this section with The Sun, Scott.
The Hugh row. The BBC says they're sorry. Apparently, the mother was seeking an apology. She got one. She didn't get any money, though, for selling the story to The Sun, but she did get an apology. So hopefully that'll shut her up.
So
Hugh can move
it's
on.
the apology for them having revealed the story, or for allowing Hugh Edwards to conduct this relationship?
I think because they didn't act, the BBC didn't act. She put a complaint in. They handed her off to a department that wasn't really very effective.
Yeah.
And she was wondering what was going on. And in the meantime, her family was being pulled apart, although her son was denying that he had a problem with what had happened. The son is of age. He's not a juvenile. And so it proceeded that she then sold the story to the son of what had happened, and then became something where the BBC had to fire or suspend Hugh, who's probably never going to win. I don't think
so
it's
she maybe gets some more money from the Sun now. I mean, one feels sorry for all the party involved. It's a very sordid, shabby sort of affair.
Well,
but she's one, or this lad is one of hundreds, thousands, presumably, who are involved in strange...
We're not sure if he's gotten any money from the Sun. We're not.
Really?
We're not sure about that. There's nothing mentioned here about cash.
No.
Steve,
At the time, there was accusations of Hugh paying money for, was it OnlyFans? Some other online servicey thing.
He had then got himself addicted to drugs that he wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise. But as you say, he was of majority age. He's,
Yeah. This story just looks like it's the Sun trying to prove that what they ran last time had a bit more meat to it, and it kind of didn't. It was the mum complaining, but the person themselves saying, no, releasing a statement saying the thing in the Sun is wrong.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we'll leave it there. That's the front pages dealt with. Join us after the break. MP apologies, policing budgets and terror alerts. But there's no connection between any of those stories, and I've never suggested there was. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliner. So I'm still here with comedians Steve N. Allen and Scott Kupuru. We're going to dive into the papers now, Steve. And the Times has the scarcely surprising news that the UK terror threat has been increased due to the Middle East living here now.
Yeah, a UK terror threat increased due to Middle East crisis. The government's independent terrorism reviewer has warned that the risk of attack has increased. There's a good logic there. The ringleader for the London bombings on July the 7th in 2005 was motivated by events in Palestine. So you've got the logic around it. It makes a lot of sense. Our streets seem to be somewhat impacted by it. I mean, there's another thing that when this level gets increased or decreased, I mean, I'm not sure how much it impacts people's lives. We hear about it in the news. Maybe there's something behind the scenes.
Say it, sorted.
Yeah, but no one's going to go like, let me just check what the terror threat level is. I might not even see or say this one. So I'm not sure what it's like, the doomsday clock.
I suppose the only thing they're covering their backs, like 90% of things these days. If there is to be some sort of outrage, they don't want it to be said, well, you didn't even increase the terror threat.
Yeah. Also, I do wonder, would anyone really point anything out? I mean, I think Londoners are in their own bubble anyway. They're going home from work or going to work. They're busy. But if they saw something that seemed suspicious, would they really point a finger? They'd be so terrified, most people I know, of being perceived as being, you know, paranoid or racist or something.
Yeah.
Why that guy? Why that woman?
Certainly a fear, isn't it?
At least with the police, it definitely is.
I'd also do wonder whether, I mean, events have been moving pretty fast in some regards since early October, but I suspect that would have been part of the plan, wouldn't it? Don't you think? This wasn't intended to be an isolated. These things are always supposed to trigger a domino effect.
I think that, yes, they got what they wanted. Whatever the terrorists wanted on the 7th of October is they've achieved, and then some.
Yeah, that's the horrible thing, isn't it? That they regard themselves as collateral in a weird way.
And I think they see this as did the people that organised 9/11 as being much more successful than they'd hoped.
Yeah.
The ripple is much farther than
even this story does move us away from talking about whether the threat of terror is impacting the way that Parliament works. Everything seems to be pulling away from this one story that we should talk about. Like people who threaten violence had, for a short time, more control over parliamentary procedure than the SNP did. Maybe we should address that at some stage.
I mean, when you put it like that, it actually sounds like...
Not a bad thing, actually.
One for the credit. Times now, Scott. Paul Scully has apologised. I have to say, Paul, don't go there.
The former minister's remarks about parts of Birmingham and London have added to the Islamophobia row plaguing the Conservative Party. This guy said, Paul Scully said, a Conservative MP, he stated that there are parts of London and Birmingham that are no-go areas, and locals from those areas branded him ignorant for his damaging remarks. I lived in Birmingham when I finished my university education.
Yeah.
I lived in Edgbaston, and there were parts of Birmingham that we were told at university to not walk through. This is 1985.
Yeah.
I live in the part of Tower Hamlets.
Can I ask you, were you told because you're gay or because you were a student or just because, you know, this is a violent area? Because
I don't think they knew I was gay then.
When I was at Southampton University, there were no-go areas just because they didn't... The town and gown, I mean, it's a classic tension, you know. You're likely to get beaten up.
It was an announcement they made at the university, so I think it's for everyone.
So you went to the University of Birmingham?
I did.
So did I, and they never mentioned any areas.
Yeah, they did.
I walked around all the areas.
But you're younger than me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean, am I?
Well,
it
was longer ago. But also, and I might have been more paranoid because of the gay thing, you're right.
Yeah.
But also, they interviewed some people in this, in Tower Hamlets near the tube stop in Whitechapel, which is around the corner from my flat. My husband's been mugged 4 times near our building.
In your building?
Near our building.
Right.
The entire row of Cambridge Heath Road, which is where the Backyard Comedy Club is, which is around the corner from where they interview people, is all... every post has a Palestinian flag. Now, these things don't make me feel... I don't mind the Palestinian flag in a way because it's given the gay flag a break, but I do feel a bit like a point is trying to be made.
Yeah. Although, and I absolutely take this, and these things are a developing situation which a lot of us feel anxious about. No-go areas has a particular meaning, I think, for most people, which means that the police have accepted that they will not. Well,
this is what I'm saying. My husband...
Like students don't go there. It's like the police have essentially handed over control.
But the last time my husband was beaten up by some people out front of our building, the police told him it was his fault for inciting the violence. And we knew that was because the people that had beaten up my husband were people from a background that the police didn't want to deal with. They felt uncomfortable.
Protected species, OK.
So
Meanwhile...
it's not inaccurate that he said
No, I
that.
understand. One place that certainly isn't a no-go area for either police or Friends of Palestine is central London on a Saturday afternoon. They've been going there quite a lot.
And it's having an impact. Time spent handling protests puts neighbourhood policing at risk. So one side of this is, yes, so much resource is spent policing these demonstrations. It will have an impact. They say it will have an impact in neighbourhood policing. This is the good side. I think that was already gone anyway.
Yeah.
So is there that much of a cost?
Can anyone remember that? It feels like a sort of Enid Blyton concept.
Yeah.
We used to have horses go past our building when we first moved there in 2006. They haven't been around for quite a long time.
No.
That was nice.
I remember we occasionally see them on Lisson Grove with carriages. Yeah, sorry.
But now it's just traffic police. If you want to find a policeman, do 75.
Yeah.
They're talking about, obviously, the Israel-Gaza protest and Just Stop Oil. Little update on that. Oil is still going, so those protests didn't quite work. But the police have spent at least £30 million deploying thousands of officers. This is having an impact, this is since last October, having an impact on, they say, the mental health of the police, because they can't have any of the rest days, leaves being cancelled. They have to be deployed from elsewhere to come and sort this out. I don't know how you solve it, because I'm in favour of the right to protest, but if it's every weekend...
Every single weekend, I think that's the point, isn't it? And also, on this occasion, I do have some sympathy with those officers who are not only missing leave, but these are quite stressful demonstrations precisely because their instructions appear to be kind of muddy, if not, muffled.
The way that I feel for them in Tower Hamlets as well, in a way, because Tower Hamlets is both the richest and the poorest borough in Britain. And when you put poverty next to that kind of wealth, this is what happens. This kind of violence happens, and people feeling unsafe. You've got wealthy students renting flats right next to council blocks, and where this is meant, people are meant to get along, they don't always. I think that expectation that diversity works is not always accurate.
And of course, these marches will not cease of anything that the British government even could do, even if it decided. And
when are the police going to respond to some of the threats at these marches? I don't understand. They're made to camera. They're made for a point, and they're ignored. A jihad is not a peaceful movement.
A lot of blather from the Met on that front. Very disappointing. On to the real threat now, Scott, though, which is neither Islamism nor a resurgent far-right, but is actually plasticated placentas.
Just when you thought that placenta was fine to go back in, it's not good. Don't go back in.
Don't fry the placenta without filtering.
Seriously, it's full of polyethylene, which is plastic from bottles and bags. 62 placenta tissues were examined by scientists, and they found this, what I just mentioned. They also found, a second study revealed microplastics in all about 17 human arteries that blocks the arteries, apparently.
I mean, it is, I'm laughing, but it is pretty horrific.
It is.
Microplastics is getting everywhere. And, of course, it's among other things, an endocrine disruptor. This is one concern,
it's found in babies' feces, so babies are consuming it through breast milk.
I'm having to cut back on the amount of baby feces I eat. This is a worrying situation. Honestly, though, I tried to remember...
How do you clean them, then?
But it was, I Googled it earlier, 1907, when Bakelite, your first plastic, was invented. So in that short space of time, we've, now filled our gonads with plastic bags somehow. Give us another 100 years and we'll all look like Cher.
And it's all a byproduct as well, weirdly, isn't it?
Yeah. But from the deep oceans to the highest mountains, they're finding this plastic everywhere. And apparently it leads to more people getting colon cancer, the declining sperm count, which we've talked about.
Hey, I'm just a kid.
I know, it's not your problem. You're doing your job, right? You're keeping the curve up.
You can hang up your...
I'm drinking plastic bags left, right and centre.
But there are, if I remember rightly, they've developed some sort of organism that eats the stuff, right?
Yeah, well...
That's what we need more of, right?
Yeah, you can have a bacteria that eats plastic.
Yeah, it's called a human. Humans are eating it, that's the problem.
On to the Telegraph now, Steve, and as Orwellian doublethink newspeak goes, this one is a corker from Romsey School.
Isn't it? Masterclasses of 150 pupils helps to beat teacher staffing shortage. This is down in Hampshire, the Romsey School. They sent a letter out saying that they don't have enough people to teach sciences, basically, because science is difficult to teach because it's a proper subject. None of this English literature, you can just make it up, lark. And to be fair, some people...
No wrong answers. Oh, yes, there are.
And some people give up the science to try and be funny on telly. So, we've all got some blame here. But because they don't have enough teachers, they thought, let's just do a class where the teaching ratio is 150, not 30, which seems better. 150 to 1. People will hate that. No, wait. Call it a masterclass.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of a masterclass,
A
isn't it?
masterclass is like one-to-one traditionally. It's like, or maybe a handful, like an apprentice.
Although in the article it does say one mother who wished to be anonymous, so this was clearly written by the Telegraph, not a mother, says that her 12-year-old daughter complained that they can't learn anything in this new setup. That seems less believable.
She'll learn something from her phone screen while the lesson's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel very sorry for these kids. And, of course, this is coming in at a time when Labour are proposing to put on VAT onto private school fees. And that's, understandable. But it's going to be an increasingly us and them kind of society, isn't it? The private school, you get class sizes about 15. And I'm sure this isn't universal, but science has to be taught with experiment, with interaction. You can't just have somebody blathering on at the front of the room for 30 minutes.
It is the interaction, it's
the
the communication, isn't it, that kids are lacking, and I think that's terrifying for kids.
Yeah. Well, hopefully parents can make up when they get home, get a merit chemistry kit out and do a few experiments.
Yeah, that's likely.
We're cooking tonight. That's the halfway mark. After the break, we have the return of the crooked pub and the supermarket nudge that could help straighten you out too. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time. And I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it. As you know, Eamon, you can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So we have the Mirror to kick off this section. Scott, this one will appeal to fans of pints and poetic justice.
Well, the Crooked House pub in Dudley, West Midlands, caught fire and then was immediately torn down. No. Wrong.
No, it did. No, I wouldn't say that.
You think they burned it?
I'm not saying
for insurance.
How it caught.
Well, I thought too, but then it was such a popular building. I thought,
not for insurance,
they?
just because they wanted to build it.
They wanted to build.
They wanted to knock it down.
flats.
Yeah, but I mean that's speculation. But that's
Yeah, you got to
obviously
do
what
this
these people
legally.
think. Yeah,
you have to do air quotes.
But now, like the king isn't going to be around for much longer. Like Andy Street, the mayor of the area.
Andy Street.
Andy Street's his name. I know.
I know.
It's great, isn't it?
Yes, it's suitable in this case. But
He said on social media he promises that he's ordered that the building be rebuilt as was. It was an 18th century sort of sloped roof, kind of goofy. They say wonky.
So it's going to be
building.
like a Disneyland version of it.
It is. Yeah.
I like that idea, but at the same time, it's
just a pub.
Isn't
No,
it?
it's a correct punishment because so the story was they wanted planning permission to get rid of it. They didn't get that planning permission, caught fire, and then was knocked down by some JCBs. And now they're going to have to rebuild it. And I'd love them to have to film it as a Grand Designs. Imagine making Kevin McLeod turning up and they're just seething about how much money they have to spend.
Well, they will have to because it's going to be like an English heritage thing, isn't it? Like I remember I was at some stately home and got to talking with the gardener or whatever about their attempts to renovate just one outhouse, and they had to find the original kind of green oak. You know what I mean? Like it had to be done with the correct rafters and everything because there's like grade 2 listed, grade 1 listed, but the full-on English heritage. You have to have exactly the right amount of lead in the paint, and all this kind of stuff.
It's going to be hard to find the bodies buried into the walls. That's like that. You know what I mean? Try to dig them up.
Well, I shall definitely go and have a pint when it's done. Good luck to him. Further apology news now in the Mail, Stephen. Celtic manager Brendan Rodgers is showing the government how to do it.
Yeah, refuses to apologise and blames society for looking to find something offensive. This is the backlash after he was in an interview. The interview was not going well. There was some tension. He ends the interview by saying, good girl, and then carries on. And it very much comes across like, now we know more information. He says he wasn't intending to be offensive. She said she didn't take offence.
No.
That should be the end of it, apart from there are other people saying, no, I'm
offended by
proxy. Yeah. And he should resign and apologise and all of these things. It has to be possible to patronise or be rude to someone.
Yeah.
And if that person that you're being rude to is a woman, it not be misogyny. Otherwise, you've ruled something out.
Absolutely. It feels like the context, the backdrop is there's all the stuff from Joey Barton about women football commentators are rubbish. There's a sort of sense that their position as voices of authority in football is precarious. And so this is not a bit of banter. I'm not arguing for it, but I guess that's what the context is.
In the story, he talks about how he used a film inspired. He found I can't remember the name of whoever it was who sailed around the world, and he then shows his players, watch this woman. She was inspirational. So if he's citing a woman
the one that Frankie Boyle says, how many times she has to go around the world before she realises she's a lesbian? That
might undo some of the good work that Brendan was trying to do by bringing that up. But if he's citing women as inspirational figures, then I know maybe it is a lot. I'm not racist.
It was like Kevin Keegan, wasn't it? He made a speech in which he was saying they're fantastic and they're doing this and women's football is great fun, and then he made some tiny remark about how he wouldn't necessarily hire one, to be a manager of a men's side or something like that. And that's what they zoom in on. They're just waiting for which is why you should never apologise. Good on him. Guardian now, Scott. Surely irrefutable evidence that putting women in top board-level positions has a detrimental effect on their share value.
It's why the economy is devastated. Women hold 42% of board seats at big UK firms, the Guardian states, but just 10 are FTSE 100 bosses. Apparently, the proportion of board positions held by women has increased since 2017 by 24.5%, but the increase is much smaller for CEOs. We've gone from 15 in 2011 to 21 today out of the top 100.
The obvious thing to say is that there's a sort of time lag with these things, isn't it? You can't just go, OK, we want equal rights, equal opportunities for everyone, so we're going to install, 50 CEOs in FTSE 100 companies.
And how many fashion boards are there? Really? There's Burberry, there's Next.
How much typing needs doing this?
Exactly. How many phone calls have to be answered?
They're making extraordinary progress on this front. I suppose the only way to do it is to keep the pressure in the smaller...
And I bet those 21 women want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
They like the small number of them because they can kind of rule the roost.
The girl boss.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing in this story is looking at how there's not been that much regulation have to be imposed top-down. Other countries have achieved similar figures by having that regulation, but this is more It's not market force. This is a sense of society wishing this to happen, and then it happens. Maybe you don't need as much.
Is it really, or is it just companies trying to look good? Like, look, we're Burberry, we have a woman running it. Look at us. Hello, look at us.
Well, I suppose it depends if they're doing well or they do badly. There's a woman, is it Sharon White, who's running John Lewis Waitrose, and they have not had a particularly good time out of it. And I mentioned this to my wife, who has actually worked for them and knows a bit about PR, and she said, actually, she's great. None of the problems that they're confronting are her fault. But there is a tendency, if you're a bit of a token or a novelty, that people go, you see.
Women really stick together, don't they?
Yeah.
Your wife doesn't even work there anymore, and she's defending her. That's unbelievable.
John Lewis Partnership, interesting
this?
stat in here, 62% of women are in leadership roles, so we need to get that down. If we're about representation, 62% is
it only ever ratchets, Steve. You should have learned that by now.
Fire some babes, fire them now.
The Jordan Peterson thing of saying, like, how comes there are no men in pants people?
Nat West had a female CEO, didn't she?
Yeah, she had to step down.
And they closed branches, didn't they?
Didn't end well. They closed one account.
Yeah.
Anyway, gender news continues now, Steve. The Times have a story about George at Asda that should surprise no one who was familiar with Enid Blyton's most famous non-binary character, George.
Well, Asda launched it. Yeah, you say non-binary, gender-neutral.
I'm sorry,
they're bringing out gender-neutral children's clothing range.
Yeah.
It says it wants to mix things up. The Little Angel collection is being there just to mix things up. You know, unisex clothes that we've had forever.
Yes.
Them. But imagine you call them unisex.
So they'd be like jeans, but for girls.
Imagine that. But you call them, if you call it unisex, same for toilets, hairdressers, all of this.
So instead of just having pink T-shirts with a unicorn on or blue ones with a spaceship on, now there might be like a white one that might just have a horse on, and you wouldn't know.
It's amazing. You should work for George at Asda. Many parents have said, it says here, they've expressed dismay for years about overtly gendered clothing. I mean, as a relatively new parent of my first daughter, she's only a month old, and I've already made a rule. We're having none of that princess lark. Because I don't want her to grow up to be a toxic person to date. So I thought instead, let's go for stuff. My daughter will receive hand-me-downs of stuff that people have bought for my lad. And I think it's going to make me look progressive. You dress a daughter in rockets and trucks, and it looks like I'm preparing her for STEM subjects.
Absolutely, that's fantastic.
Well, if she turns out to be a serial killer, then we're going to blame you.
Matilda had 5 of those Disney princess things, and I felt exactly the way you did, but it didn't ruin her. It was like not even in the top 10 of things that have ruined her.
To drive a car that's powered on fairy dust.
But God, it annoyed me so much. I was like, can you not see what you're doing to the perhaps the single most toxic aspect of a young girl's personality? You're absolutely squirting petrol on it. Anyway, staying with the Times, Scott, and it sounds like nudging people can help them to lose weight. Yet when I do that to my wife, I am a monster.
Yeah, well, it's funny how that is, right? An industry-wide scheme, the Times says, is requiring major retailers to put healthier food at the heart of their business model. And NHS says it will save billions. Apparently, it will reduce the rate of obesity in this country by about 5 points, I think is what it says, because 23% of people in this country are obese and morbidly obese.
Wow.
And this will slash obesity by about 4 or 5% if they just in the front of the market, or they put promotional brands that are healthy in the front, so people think, oh, I'm going to get raisins today instead of chocolate bars. Or if
raisins are still monstrously sugary. Don't kid yourself.
But they're natural sugar. They're easier for the body to process.
A little bit of fibre in there. They've been doing this for a long time, though. Funny enough, I'm going to mention her in 2 stories in a row. But my wife, when she worked for Waitrose, they did this. They would put cardboard
Is she looking for a job right now? Are you plugging for her?
Doctors in white coats, kind of like pointing at the carrots. You know,
right. Oh, that's just
frowning at the. I don't know whether it was the nudge unit. You know, they were the ones who have been at number 10 Downing Street.
But if you've got a craving, you've got a craving, and if you want that, you know, that deeply stuffed chicken thing with cheese in the middle or whatever it is, you're going to eat it. You know, you got to have it.
If you put the healthy food right at the entrance and near the checkout, and put the bad food at the furthest part of a supermarket, it's a surprisingly long walk.
You should encounter the bad food straight away, at which point your willpower is strongest. You march straight through it. When you get to the checkout, that's when you see the healthy snacks.
But if you have to walk all the way back to get the unhealthy stuff, you might lose a couple while you're going back there, right?
That's true, yeah.
Make them jump.
The bonus benefits just mounting up here. One more section to go. Cornflakes for supper, disrespectful loo breaks, and women who are no better than they ought to be. That's all coming up. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Mike Freer joins me now. Mike, thank you very much for coming into the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Firstly, how are you?
It's been a busy day, and it's been quite a traumatic experience. It's a real wrench to walk away from a job that you love, but also a constituency that you've become. You know, I live there; it's my home, and I regard many of my constituents as friends, and it is an amazing place. And to walk away from that is really quite. It's quite an emotional wrench to think this was a job I loved, but unfortunately I can't do it anymore.
Can you talk me through the process? Because you mentioned about the alleged arson attack, etc., being the final straw, but this has been a really quite vile journey to get to this point. So what kind of threats have you had? What's that look like?
Well, like every MP, I mean, you day in, day out, you get abusive emails, you get low-level stuff that, whether we should accept it, but we do, it's graffiti, it's things like, I've had, in the past, I've had a mock Molotov cocktail left on the office door, meaning we had to evacuate the whole building. I've come out of my house and found a note on my car. Where I live is common knowledge, but what I drive is less so. And it's a few weeks after John Mann had the wheel nuts on his car tampered with. So that all kind of makes you get a bit, what on earth's going on. But I've had 2 run-ins with the organisation that was Muslims Against Crusades, and people like Anjem Chowdhury, who was behind that organisation, been to prison. But online it said, I used to do surgery in mosques, so I wanted to go out and see people. And online there's a picture of me saying, you're not welcome in our mosque, let Stephen Timms be a pointed reminder. So it's not very subtle.
Well, just for our viewers and listeners who might not remember that.
Stephen Timms, of course, was stabbed by a woman who'd been radicalised. Thank heavens he survived. So it was a very unsubtle.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. For our final section, Steve, you get this story from The Guardian about eating cornflakes for breakfast, but I think we all know who it was made for, this story, don't we?
Yes.
Sadly, he's not here.
It's all about the sugars.
Yeah.
Let them eat flakes is the headline. Kellogg's CEO says poor families should consider cereal for dinner, because if that's all you can afford, that's all you're worth or something. Multi-millionaire Gary Pilnick, he's upset the internet by saying this. What's really happening is he's just trying to flog more of his products into it. Like, they've already got breakfast, they've already got drunks coming home. Let's try and get some of the poor people at dinner. But cornflakes famously invented to try and stop masturbation. And
was it? I thought it was constipation. It was masturbation.
Masturbation.
Okay.
Well, trust me, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I do a lot of research. I eat a lot of cornflakes, and as long as you don't try and do both at the same time.
Do you remember that old joke, though, about the 2 old fellas, old war heroes, sitting on the bench, Chelsea pensioners in their 80s, and one of them turns to the other and goes, do you remember those pills they used to give us to stop us getting frisky? The other one goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, I think they're starting to work.
But one person on the internet says the $5 family box of cereal ain't that cheap.
No.
It's the same as buying a refrigerated...
It's a lousy way to get calories, apart from the fact that there are empty calories, they'll make you fat and you've got no... Well, they can beef them up with vitamins, but yeah.
But loads of people eat cereal for dinner. I mean, on Seinfeld, there's boxes of cereal over his fridge. He eats cereal all the time, all day long.
The iron that they fortify it with is actual iron. It's not like iron as part of a...
Not like the iron in Iron Brew, which is actually just orange.
It's not like ferric oxide or something like this. It's actual just bits of the metal. You run if you put a cornflake on water and run a magnet near it, you can pull the cornflake towards it.
That's cool.
If I was, I don't want to but if I was trying to run a family on a budget, I would be teaching them how to... Minesweep restaurants. That's how I survived on no money for weeks in Europe. Just go to self-service restaurants and like finish up the leftovers.
Go on lots of dates.
You get everything you need then. You get meat, you get vegetables, you get,
other
cut and
people's
shut
spit.
baguettes. Yeah.
It's good for you.
Anyway, I don't think Kellogg's is the answer. Daily Mail have a story about a huge row that has erupted in the comedy world. It's not Frankie Boyle's most controversial opinion. We've already cut through that one, but this one has got tongues wagging as well. Should toilets be closed during the set?
Right. Should toilets be banned at comedy gigs altogether? Comedian says it's highly disruptive when audience members get up and go to the toilet. And this one comedian being interviewed on the Good Morning Britain show, comedian Kane Brown, who we'd not heard of, and then we looked him up. He has 115,000 followers on Instagram. He's quite famous.
Wow. I had a look at him on YouTube as well, because I hadn't heard of him. Anyway, moving on.
Well, there you go. All right, so anyway, he says that toilets should be shut down during shows.
Yeah.
It's really destructive. Audience members get up and, go for a piss. But I think you should let people do what they want. I'm in favor of leaving bars open, although a lot of clubs close the bar during a show. People are out; they want to have a good time.
It depends on the kind of. I think if you're in a theatre and there's like 12 people seated tightly along you, and you've got to push your way forward, ideally you want to go before you sit down.
But he's saying clubs here. He's saying comedy gigs here. So
yeah. Oh, if it's just in a
for an hour-long show, of course you have to let people use the toilet.
Yeah.
But for a 20-minute set, you'd think they could be able. But there's that club up in Manchester that's no longer there, and famously people would get up and just walk right in front of the stage over each other for the coke and the cocaine and the cocaine and the cocaine and the cocaine.
Badly arranged that was terrible. There's another story, Steve, in The Independent that will surprise only those who get their psychological insights from young adult fiction novels.
A quarter of women think sex work should be stigmatised, according to this piece of research, which makes sense because, how do I phrase this nicely? No one likes competition.
No, it was right. Female intersexual competition. That's exactly what it is, isn't
disruptor in the market in some ways. In this transactional nature, if one demand can meet supply through money. And it's what I find interesting about this is that it's saying stigmatised, not illegal or not legal.
No,
that
shame.
People should hate you. For shame, like the shame walking in Game of Thrones and all that.
I mean, stigmatised is literally the stigmata, isn't it? So
I don't think they mean that, though.
No, they should. You should be nailed to a cross.
I would think women would like hookers because it gets them off their back. I mean, for a woman who's married, it's a lot of pressure. And like you coming home late at night, please, please, please. It's just easier. Go down the street and bang that lady next door.
It might be a thing that changes over the course of a marriage. It might be that 20 and 30-year-old women don't feel that it's something that a man should just be able to go out and
They're
buy.
aspirational.
Yeah.
But those dreams will be taken out of their eyes.
Yeah.
Their future will be destroyed by whatever happens to them. And in 10 or 20 years, they'll realise, I'd rather have them in the other room.
My suspicion is that the greatest threat to both marriages and prostitutes now is online pornography. I mean, it's so extraordinarily prevalent and high-tech and smooth and glossy, isn't it?
I have no idea, but I know.
You look great at it, put it that way.
Thank you.
Scott, The Independent, again, I don't think I can improve on the headline. Willy Wonka experience ends in tears.
As police are called and furious families demand refunds. Described as a full Wonka experience, these people up north went along in Glasgow to a warehouse that was decorated with a rainbow and a bouncy castle. They paid £35 each for the world of pure imagination, promising a delectable moment with your children. And they were given an empty warehouse with a homeless guy wandering through in the back. That was it. And the organizers called the House of Illuminati. They should have known from that. They should have known.
They should have known.
They've had to pay back. I know. They've had to pay back, I think it's over 800 refunds.
Look at that.
850 refunds.
So dismal.
And they've closed the experience. Poor kid. Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? But these kids want to just have fun. They don't.
The terrible thing is, if you wanted to create a Willy Wonka experience at home, with your own imagination, they would have more fun, less money, and less chance would be.
But maybe the kids enjoy being together.
Don't want to be taken to these things half the time, really.
In its defence, mistakes were made. Apparently, there was a poster that was AI generated, so none of the poster stuff was there.
Right.
But this is the Willy Wonka experience. The kids didn't enjoy it. It's about making kids cry. Remember the film?
Very good. 5 out of 6 kids at least have to go home either dead or disappointed. Finally, Steve, the Mail have the news that human beings are becoming less sexually attractive as they age and have children. This is bizarre.
Scientists confirm what women have always known. Men do let themselves go after marriage, it says. They eat more. I wonder what motivates men to need comfort food when it's difficult. I wonder why why they lose other pleasures. It also says that men stop exercising. I wonder why they don't have access to their own free time to do the sports that they
You know
enjoy.
what it is, though? This is all accurate sarcasm, but also it is women deliberately feeding their men up. This has been proven. It's evolutionary. Men's testosterone goes down in the domestic environment so that they don't go out and get other women pregnant, and they tend to be more tolerant of their kids and that sort of thing. If you're a high testosterone male, you tend to be angry and quick to, lash out.
I always think women dress the men they're with in a certain way so they know when to hit on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, purple
and then they go, oh, I love your dad bod, wobble, wobble, wobble.
I love your stench when no one else does. No one else, unless you're a hooker. That's why, like we said, we need hookers.
It's always slightly suspicious, I think, when you see a bloke who does have like a couple of kids, is well into marriage, and still is like chiselled and V-shaped.
Well, you see that in Norway a lot because they got to be outdoors, running around and skiing.
Yeah,
right.
It's even worse when they've not been, and all of a sudden they get fit at 50.
Yeah,
that midlife crisis, definitely having an affair, but no one's actually pointing it out.
I think babies make you fat because they're delicious, but also as they get older, they want to run around. You got to be active with the kids. Like in 2 years, all this baby fat will fall off.
Sure. So how long have you been married, Scott?
Too long, way too long, 12 years.
But it didn't make any difference at all to you?
No.
So presumably it's the kids that arrived.
My husband was thinner when we met. He's a bit chubbier now.
Okay.
You're
Brazilian.
But he's the younger one, so he can do what he wants.
Okay. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail, single-word headline, indefensible. The Telegraph, UK, blocks Macron's bid to send UN troops, not French, to the Ukraine. Guardian, Tories putting party before sexual assault claims, says alleged victim. The Sun, Hugh Rao, BBC say sorry. iNews have Labour yet to convince 40% of their target voters. A new poll finds. And finally, Metro, outraged that you now pay £16 for a packet of cigarettes. Well, those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Stephen Allen and Scott Capurro. Andrew Doyle will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. That should be feisty. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It will be a foggy start for some of us tomorrow, but it should stay dry across eastern areas. But through this evening, we'll see a weather front push into the southeast, so that's when there's the greatest risk of a chance of rain across southeastern areas. Behind it, though, it will turn much clearer. So some cloud and rain through this evening across the southeast, but elsewhere it should be a fairly dry evening. But some fog will start to develop quite quickly through the night, so it will be a bit of a murky start for many areas, particularly across central southern England, but also up through the Pennines and across eastern areas of Scotland as well. So we'll feel quite cold tomorrow morning once again, but it won't be quite as frosty as it was this morning. And there will be some early sunshine where we don't see any fog through tomorrow, particularly across the far east coast, and many southeastern areas should stay dry through much of the day. But elsewhere it will turn much wetter as the day goes on, particularly across parts of the southwest of England and Wales, where we'll see some quite persistent rain at times, but also across Northern Ireland, much of Scotland and Northern England. But it will feel milder across the UK. The back of that rain will push into the southeast on Thursday, so quite a wet day to come in the southeast on Thursday. Elsewhere, though, it will be a mix of sunny spells and showers once that rain does clear through. And that's the story as we head through the rest of the week. A showery picture through Friday and Saturday as well. And after a milder spell through Wednesday and Thursday, it looks